Okay, so welcome friends. I'm Kate Godley from the Functional Medicine Center and I'm a physician assistant. And I'm here today talking with Mitch Webb. He is the owner of Primal Lift Health Coaching. And we work together with a lot of our clients. So we're really excited to talk to you today about a few things. We wanted to talk about something called neurodegeneration and how to fix it, how to address it. We also wanted to talk about mitochondrial health because a lot of the things that we do to heal the nerves and keep the brain healthy actually also heal the mitochondria. So it's kind of nice to hear about both in one conversation. And then the last thing we wanted to mention was autophagy. What is it and how do we get there? And so some of the things we're going to talk about are a little bit more advanced, but we're also going to try to dial it back so that it applies to everyone. And something I will say is if there's one or two takeaways you get from this conversation, it's that there is something that you can do today that doesn't cost money. And that's probably starting some intermittent fasting, which Mitch will also address at the end of the conversation. So we'll try to keep it like within 30 minutes, and because we know everybody's attention span is nice and short these days, but we also wanted to give you something to do while you're homebound. Okay, so, and Mitch and I are both working on additional videos that we'll post on our YouTube, and I will put, and our Instagram, and I'll put our links, like when I post this up on YouTube, I'll put our links there, so.
We should probably timestamp this too. You know, it's March 25th, 2020, and we're all at home with the coronavirus, and so just trying to share some tips and tricks to boost your immune system and hope you feel good while you're at home.
Yep. Thanks, Mitch. Yep. Okay, so the first thing I just wanted to start with is, what is neurodegeneration? It's kind of a big long term that includes a few illnesses or diagnoses, including Parkinson's, MS, and Alzheimer's. Some people feel that autism spectrum disorder is on this. Some people don't. It's sort of a controversial topic. But for the purposes of this conversation, I do think a lot of what we're saying applies to people that have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And then also, neurodegeneration can be caused by a traumatic brain injury or a TBI. And a concussion or a head injury can, of course, make any neurodegeneration that's going on worse. It can also trigger neurodegeneration to begin. And so basically the way I define neurodegeneration is any issue with the brain or any issue with signaling between the brain, the spinal cord, and the afferent or efferent nerves, which are basically nerves going out to the end of the skin and nerves coming back in. So everything that we use to make our body move or our senses, use our senses, or the opposite direction. Anything we're using that signals the brain coming back from the skin or from the organs as well. And there's probably a whole nother topic here where we could also talk about the vagus nerve just because it's so important, but we will leave that for another day. So I think the causes, it would be good right now to talk about some of the causes of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and what would make having a traumatic brain injury or a concussion worse. So a lot of us are exposed to heavy metals, and that is going to make this worse. The problem with heavy metal exposure that I see in my practice is that, you know, when I was an egg inside my mom who was in utero within my grandmother, that's when my heavy metal exposure could have happened. So we're talking about things that could have happened a long time ago before you even existed. And especially in families, you know, right now that goes back to lead exposure. Because if you're talking about like when my mom was pregnant, or when my grandmother was pregnant in the 50s with my mom, we're talking about lead exposure, mercury exposure then. Only recently have a lot of dentists come out talking about mercury being awful, that kind of stuff. So when I test people for heavy metal exposure, sometimes we do a urine test that's unprovoked, and sometimes we do a provoked urine. The problem with testing for heavy metals is that they like to hide in the tissues. But so if you're concerned and you'd like to get tested, definitely talk to your provider. You need to be healthy enough to do the provoked urine test. You don't want to take a chelating agent if you're not healthy enough yet. So The next thing that can lead to neurodegeneration is pesticide exposure. And of course, this can also lead to cancers. So for example, people that grew up on farms, conventional farms where they were spraying, or someone like my dad grew up working on a conventional farm, and his job was to go in, pull all the weeds that were growing around the soy crop, and they would spray the field while he was there pulling up the weeds as a kid. So needless to say, he developed kidney cancer or renal cell carcinoma. Fortunately, he did well with treatment. But the next thing I think we already mentioned is basically that head injuries, if you already are leading down a path towards something like Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, having a head injury is going to make that much worse. The problem with head injuries is that most people are not diagnosed actually when they get a concussion. And I talk to people all the time that tell me they never had a concussion, but then when I really get into it, you know, they played basketball and they bumped heads a bunch of times, or they played football and they just were never diagnosed, or they fell off their bike. So we have to do a really good history. And you as the patient, I think you can do a timeline and go back to, is there a time when you had an acute onset of depression? Sometimes that's actually a really good sign. Depression or anxiety that comes out of nowhere. Look back and see, did you have a mild head injury? And maybe you won't remember, and that's okay. I also really like sending people to axial chiropractors like Atlas orthogonal chiropractors, just because they can tell us if that first bone in the vertebrae, the atlas, is off, and that often gives me clues as to if you did have a head injury. Mm-hmm. And then of course, having that adjusted, even a typical chiropractor, if the lymph is flowing and the neck is in place, then this will help us detox the brain. So we really do need the physical alignment of the neck as well as the area where the brainstem is in order to have a healthy brain. So I do think that chiropractors and physical therapists are really important here. Anything to add with your concussion experience in terms of chiropractic?
Well, I mean, I think you're speaking to the choir here. I mean, I've dealt with a lot of these things that we're looking at. I mean, a little bit about my health history. I got really sick. I had Lyme disease, mold exposure, heavy metals. I was diabetic, you know, non-alcoholic fatty liver, lots of concussions, all kinds of stuff there. So I'm all too familiar with a lot of these things you're talking about. And, you know, when it comes to heavy metals, we know that mom passed that on. You nailed that. So I think if we've got a family that's maybe having symptoms that points towards heavy metals, a lot of times mom can just be tested, and you can bet that the kids are going to have about the same kind of load. That can absolutely be detoxed. It's a process, but you know, once you know, you can begin that, and you can get a lot of relief. For me, whenever I got my heavy metals out, I was able to get off of you know, Klonopin, Xanax, some really strong sedatives that were managing my anxiety. So my anxiety went away. I was able to focus again. So you know, heavy metals were huge for me. You know, next, getting into the pesticides. You know, there's lots of cool things that we can do. You know, I think organic is the way to go to avoid some of these, glyphosate, Roundup. But you can look at the dirty dozen. You know, maybe organic's not something that you can afford, and so you can Google dirty dozen. There's like 12 different you know, vegetables that usually they have thin skins, that the pesticides are going to penetrate a little bit more and be transferred to your body easily. Also, there's a product called Restore. I believe Restore has actually changed the name. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's a lignite supplement that plugs up the walls in your gut, and that can prevent from getting. You can even do a nasal spray. So say maybe you're somewhere on a golf course or something like that where they're spraying a lot of this stuff. You can inhale it through your nose. You can spray it. You can take the lignite, and even wine. You know, one thing when I think about Roundup, I think about wines, and even if it's an organic wine, you know, it might be next to a farm that's not organic. And so getting these old world European wines are going to help a lot.
That's interesting.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, when I first looked up the Dirty Dozen years ago, I realized that grapes are one of the dirtiest foods when they're conventional. And I realized that I think it's an average of 12 different pesticides on each grape. And so if that's the wine you're drinking, it's actually sometimes even more concentrated in the wine.
Yeah, not to mention the 200 additives that are approved for our wines, like tennis ball flavor and all these weird things that, give it, a sommelier would say, gives it these complexities. And, when I have a wine I won't drink wine from California or from the United States. And when I do, my head hurts immediately. It's like this thick, filmy kind of taste to the wine. And, when you get these old world wines, like dry farm wines is a really good example of this. And you get like a variety pack every month. There are all these wines from all over the world, and they taste like what you expect wine to taste like. It tastes like a grape, and it's advertised even as no headache, no hangover. So, I think it's just about making smarter choices.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the wines. Yeah. So, and then my next thing to mention in terms of what causes all of these issues with neurodegeneration was gut dysbiosis. And technically, dysbiosis means you have an imbalance of the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. And these imbalances can happen sometimes quickly. For example, when I was 14, before I had my tonsils out, they gave me about 8 rounds of antibiotics, all different antibiotics. So in those 3 months, basically very, very quickly, my gut went from relatively healthy to in a very bad situation in terms of the good and the bad bacteria. The other thing that goes on with the gut is something called leaky gut, right? So not everybody with leaky gut has dysbiosis, but many, many, many people have leaky gut without knowing. And one of the things that causes leaky gut is actually the heavy metal exposure. So it's like the chicken and the egg, because the gut is only 1 cell layer thick. It's like the shingles on the roof of your house where, the skin is 8 cell layers thick. So imagine such a thin lining there that a little tiny break in the lining is going to mean that the bad toxins that we're trying to eliminate in the stool are going to be reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Maybe not all of them, but at least a good portion. And, some people have leakier guts than others, but that's something that's easy to test. And it's also, you don't really need to test for leaky gut. You can kind of, based on symptoms, your provider can help you figure that out. And there's plenty of like online quizzes for, do I have leaky gut? One way I know if my gut's leaky is if I go to eat a meal that I wouldn't normally eat, and the next morning I've got joint pain. That's pretty much my heads up that my gut needs help. So
totally. And for me, speaking of TBI, not the first, but I've had several TBIs in my life, 2 really bad ones. And the first one that's when I developed an autoimmune disease after that and started having gut issues. So again, chicken or the egg. Also had antibiotics as a kid, had lots of strep throat. Z-Packs were like a normal thing in my household. I don't remember the last time now that I've taken antibiotics, but it definitely disrupted my gut. And, I've got leaky gut as well. I think a standard elimination diet for years, I poo-pooed that. I thought it was ridiculous. And, Kate, as well as I'm in the middle of this process right now, and I've seen fantastic results with my skin, with my energy levels, even sleep and anxiety. So it's tough. I think testing is fantastic, but really the best test is yourself, and really eliminating these foods that we know cause inflammation and stimulate your immune system. And then you bring them in one by one. Our friend Ludi, she's a autoimmune coach, and what she says, she gives an analogy like you're in a room with lots of noise, everybody's screaming. Maybe you're at a bar. Like think about a bar, you're at midnight, everybody's screaming, talking. But then you get everybody out. So maybe 3 a.m., everybody's out and it's really quiet, and you can actually hear the person talking to you instead of screaming in their ear. Well, now what you do is you bring in each person one by one, and you're going to get that reaction. So for me, same like Kate, you said your joints hurt. My skin flares up. So I've got psoriasis. As soon as I bring in something my body's not going to agree with, it flares up. Now it lets me know, and that's great. So now I know I can avoid that. But that also doesn't mean that we have to avoid it for the rest of our life. It's right now until that reaction dies down, that immune reaction. And now, even if you have something now, like I'm trying some things right now, things aren't working. That doesn't mean I'm never going to have, eggs or milk or grains again. But I could try them every couple of months and see how that goes. And I think the body can. I think the underlying message here too is your body is an amazing healing machine, and if you give it what it wants and what it needs, then you can have your health back.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we want to emphasize with the treatment. So I have seen people that already have tremors or already have memory loss, and they're young, but they're going down a path towards Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, and we can reverse it. And that's the take home message too. Mitch, you also mentioned Lyme. And so I wanted to just mention that infections can trigger neurodegeneration. And if you think about it, some infections are so small, like Lyme is a spirochete that's tiny, it actually passes the blood-brain barrier. So some of that infection is actually getting into the brain. And same thing with mold. Mold is everywhere. Different types of mold are worse for us than others, but the mycotoxins, or the toxins that the mold creates, are so tiny that they do pass the blood-brain barrier. So people, oftentimes I know they've had mold exposure when they tell me they feel drunk, even when they haven't eaten anything and they haven't drank anything,
I've been into lately with the blood-brain barrier, how important it is to, I think that's why I had a lot of heavy metal issues, because I break the blood-brain barrier from the head injuries, these toxins, whether it's Lyme or heavy metals, are now flooding into my brain. And there's so many things that you can do for leaky brain that I'm learning about too, where, maybe you're not drinking alcohol to excess. Low-hanging fruit would be, not poisoning your body, getting plenty of sleep, managing stress, and doing exercise that also is not too stressful, but supports your immune system.
Yep. And we'll get back to exercise piece in just a minute. So I think the other thing I wanted to mention was, can we just define some of the symptoms of damaged mitochondria? We've talked a little bit about neurodegeneration, but what happens when the mitochondria is damaged is first of all, the liver has about 40,000 mitochondria per cell. And so this is where we make a lot of the energy. And mitochondria, if you guys remember, like 7th grade biology, that's where all the ATP is coming from. So we're making energy. But things like Epstein-Barr virus, things like Lyme, mold, heavy metals, all of these can actually damage the mitochondria of the cell. And so what happens now is we're not making enough energy and we feel tired all the time. So when people have chronic fatigue syndrome, it's usually directly related to mitochondrial damage. And one thing that I love about Dr. Terry Walls, who has essentially healed her own multiple sclerosis using food, she talks a lot about telomere length. And I'm bringing that in here because what she found was she was working on food and a diet that would actually heal her nerves and heal her brain and heal her mitochondria. What she ended up doing was measuring telomere length. So basically, telomeres tell us how old we are. So the longer the telomere, the older the cell is, and the closer we're getting, the more aging is happening in the body. And Mitch is going to talk to us about things we can do to reverse aging. But basically, what Dr. Terry Walls found was that after some time, even a short period of time, like 6 months, doing the foods she was eating, which were basically like very low carb, tons of vegetables, and healthy proteins. Yeah, she found that her telomeres actually shortened by a lot. So in other words, she reversed the aging process. And a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, you said shortened, lengthened.
Sorry. No, it shortened.
Is it? I thought the longer the telomere length, the more longevity you have. No?
Let me double check. Her little talk is actually easy to find.
I listened to a podcast with her yesterday. It was fascinating. She was talking about controlling. She knows that whenever I guess she has some nerve pain in her face.
You're right. Yep, you're right.
Trigeminal neuralgia, and so like she knows that that's her first sign that she's having nerve issues again, and she knows that some of the strategies we'll talk about, she has to do more fasting and things like that to increase the density of her mitochondria to make them work better. Exactly. One of the things Dr. Pompa told me years ago is heal the cell and get well.
Yep. So basically, as you age, the telomeres shorten. Sorry, go back and fix that. So they shorten, and then what you can do is you can reverse that whole process and begin to actually lengthen your telomeres. So, I hate to say it, but we're all a little bit vain. And sometimes what I see in people is that their face looks younger, like their face looks physically younger as they start to eat differently. So we don't necessarily have to measure our telomeres, we can tell actually by how we look. Like if you look at a picture, you know, and Mitch and I have both experienced this, where like 5-6 years ago, if you looked at a picture of us compared to today, we actually look younger because of the things that we've done. So
Yeah, I look like I was 40 years old at 25.
yeah. Yeah. But so getting back to the food, what are some things people can do so that they have more energy and so that they're healing their brain when they're eating?
Well, I mean, I think it all comes down, well, a big piece of this is reactive oxygen species and the oxidation that comes from eating inflammatory foods, over consuming sugar, which causes inflammation. So yeah, I think first things first is getting out some of those damaging foods. And that could be as easy as, you know, reducing your sugar intake. Maybe you just cut out packaged processed foods for now. If it's in a package, if you can't grow it or kill it, then it's usually a processed food. So getting some of those processed damaging foods out of there. Maybe go as far as to even removing grains. We know that grains cause rampant inflammation are at the root cause of a lot of these autoimmune diseases and neurodegenerative diseases that we're discussing right now. I think movement is a big one. You know, moving our bodies so that we're stimulating our cardiovascular system, getting into some autophagy, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and even, you know, getting into, you know, a ketogenic approach. So you're getting those carbs down to the point that your liver actually starts releasing ketones that support your brain, body, heart, and muscles better than sugar does in a less oxidative in a less oxidative way. So you're improving the mitochondria that way, making more ATP, getting more energy. And I think, you know, we'll talk about this in a little bit as well. A very advanced strategy would be fasting. But the good news is you don't have to do these long water fasts. Those can be a very advanced strategy, and for the right person who's, you know, really ill, it can help. It helps me significantly. But there's so many little things that you can do that, I mean, even a 24-hour fast, people get really scared when they hear that number, but really it's having dinner one night, skipping breakfast and lunch, and then having dinner the next night. Now, you know, if you're hitting in between even 20 to 24 hours, I think autophagy starts increasing around 18 hours, but, you know, 24 hours is just like a long brunch. So there's lots of things that you can do to reduce these reactive oxygen, even taking plant sand. You know, that's where Terry Walls is coming in with these. She said that in the beginning, if she didn't have these 9 cups of vegetables, even if she was in a ketotic low carb state, she didn't feel right. And, you know, the things that she likes are going to be, you know, lots of colors, cabbage, you know, things from the mushroom family, you know, eating the rainbow. So I try to tell my clients, you know, let's try to get 4 colors in every salad, you know, and that's kind of my insurance policy for the day, to take in a lot of those antioxidants. And there's so many supplements that we could even jump into as well. I mean, there's so many things that you can do that you got to get creative. That's really what it comes down to.
But I do see people come in these days with bags of pills, and they're not sure which supplements are helping and which ones are hurting. And so that's why I kind of like when we speak to the diet and the things that you can do that are more affordable. You know, having said that, I also like to do these nutri-evals on patients where I can see which antioxidants they're missing by doing a blood draw. Yeah. And personally, when I was exposed to toxic mold, I was shocked at how low my CoQ10 was low. My glutathione was very low. My vitamin C and my magnesium were very low, even though I was taking very high doses. And so I think that just goes to show you how depleted my body was simply by trying to get the mold toxins out. I was using up all of my antioxidants. I couldn't possibly eat enough food to get enough colors. I needed to take some supplements to help.
Yeah. So. And that's where, like with you and I, something I had the same nutrient eval, or I had some nutrient deficiencies. And even right now I'm dealing with some detox pathway issues, and some things that I think are to consider, especially with Kate, is to go in and do an IV where you can get that glutathione, you can get that vitamin C, get the B vitamins, support your body. And, you know, maybe doing a couple of cycles can really jumpstart the body's detox pathways again.
Yeah. I mean, and IVs I think maybe it's intimidating the first time, kind of like coming to yoga class. You don't know what to expect, yeah. But it's pretty chill. I mean, you just come in the office and have a seat, and we have maybe some relaxing music on. You don't have to look at the IV. We hook you up pretty quickly. And I mean, sometimes we're done within 10, 12 minutes. So it doesn't have to be a long visit.
I tell you what really got me interested in integrative functional medicine is that when I had Lyme disease and I was going to see a doctor, and I'll never forget, this man was wheeled in a wheelchair. He was drooling on his shoulder. He was a doctor in the area, and his family's all with him. He wasn't communicating, wasn't making eye contact, and they gave him a brain detox. And they had things like N-acetylcysteine and glutathione, high dose vitamin C, B vitamins. And I saw this man stand up, start walking around and talking. And
It's
it
awesome.
blew my mind. And I already knew how effective we could do with just moving better and eating better. Now I'm into this whole world of like, wow, I want to go down the rabbit hole, like,
Yeah.
I love the quote from the Matrix. Do you want to eat the red pill and go to sleep, or do you want the blue pill and you want to go on a journey?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing I was going to say about that man who got the IV is, sometimes when the gut is so damaged, we can take a pill. Like I could swallow CoQ10 and actually not absorb most of it because my gut was so damaged that getting the IV really made a big difference.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, the last thing I wanted to say about the gut is just that, harmful, maybe is the right word, harmful bacteria can actually lead to the production of additional lipopolysaccharides, which basically what happens with these lipopolysaccharides is they travel from the gut directly to the brain, and they induce more damage. So you can have someone developing something like Alzheimer's because of gut damage, and it's a snowball effect where it gets worse and worse and worse until we correct the imbalance in the flora. So things like prebiotics are really important here, and things like leeks, asparagus, onions. You got to eat the foods that have the foods for the good bacteria. So prebiotics just means it feeds the good bacteria. And the nice thing is sometimes they are cheaper and they work even better than really fancy probiotics. Sometimes you need to use both, but I've seen a lot of people do well just increasing prebiotic foods in their diet and spending about 6 months taking prebiotics powders. They just taste kind of like sugar. You mix them in your water. Inulin, FOS, and GOS are some, but you can certainly look up more about prebiotics or come talk to me or Mitch about what those would be.
Yeah, I think another really good strategy there is not mixing fats with high carb and high fat do not go together. Especially if it's like a trans fat, these fried foods like canola oil, sunflower, safflower, vegetable, soybean oil. If you're eating those in the presence of a high carbohydrate food, especially grains, that can be a disaster waiting to happen. So a lot of times if I'm going to I like diet variation. I don't like eating the same thing all the time. I like moving in and out of different eating strategies. And so if I'm going to have, if I'm going to bring sweet potatoes back in, maybe I'm doing low carb for a while and it's time to bring in some root vegetables. Well, then I'm going to try to go after the leaner meats, and I'm not going to really slather olive oil and coconut oil and things like that. And I think also another good tip for that is taking fish oil, taking alpha lipoic acid, and I heard this yesterday. I mean, this is a little bit of a wormhole here, but talking about ApoE 3-4 status, or 4-4 status. This is like with your DNA, and these people have a tendency towards Alzheimer's, dementia, and if they've got the lipopolysaccharides issue there as well, then it can be a you can get an inflammation storm going. But I heard yesterday that in addition to the ALA and the fish oil is, and I'm going to be including this really soon, is krill oil. Mm-hmm. So that can really reduce that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because, this is where the supplement industry, they've started to make a lot of money, right, in the last 5 years, I would say.
Yeah.
And the problem is that a lot of the supplements that people are grabbing are not individualized. And so I saw someone yesterday and we were talking about her specific omega-3 that she'd chosen, right? And I was looking at her LDL particle size. I was looking at her APO 3-4 status, which is, again, a genetic test, but it's pretty easy to get. You can even get it with LabCorp. And it's not expensive. So that would be something that would be worth testing. This patient had a high LDL, but when I looked at her fish oil she was taking, it wasn't high in DHA. And to be quite honest, she would have had to have taken, it was, I won't say what brand it was because I don't want to smash them, but she would have had to take like 12 capsules to get enough of what I needed her to get. So I needed to switch her to something else. And she needed vitamin D. And that's where the krill oil also came in. The krill oil often has A and E and D. And so we can cut down on the number of things someone needs to take because we're personalizing these supplements for the person. So
this is another cool one too. I think this is the right acronym. They were showing that people with ApoE3/4 and the polysaccharide deal, if they did if they had 1 to 2 servings of fish in a week, that could significantly help improve their health. And you want to go with MASH, M-A-S-H, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. And so those are going to have less of the heavy metals. And even taking selenium, I believe, when you're in combination, like say you're going to have tuna. I mean, obviously you don't want to be chasing down tuna. I think it has the highest mercury of any fish, but taking some selenium with that, avoiding it, going with some of these lower, you call them like lower organisms. Like these are more the small fish that are not eating a bunch of other fish, so that mercury doesn't accumulate. And so, I mean, you can get these anywhere. Wild Planet, hands down, is my favorite brand. The rest of them kind of dry and cakey, and that's why I think they get a bad rap. But Wild Planet, sticking with the MASH, I think that's a fantastic strategy.
Yes. So say it again: mackerel, anchovies. Was it salmons or sardines?
Salmon was in there. Actually, it's sardines as well.
Sardines and herring.
That's what it was. There's an S in there. Another smash. So, I've got it written down. See, sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. That's it. Another thing I do was shellfish can be really good for this ApoE3/4 kind of deal. So like oyster, shrimp, again, Wild Planet. I think Crown Prince or something like that. I've got a stack of oysters over here and sardines. I love them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Wild Planet too, I had to do a paper on this for school, is they're not lining their cans with BPA. So what that means is you're avoiding the plastic exposure that you get with a typical canned fish. And I'm not sure that everyone realizes that some of these cans are lined with plastic. So you got to avoid.
Be like just eating the small fish out of it. Might be grocery. I know I try to introduce to all of my clients, especially if it's an olive oil, it's really good. But you could take these salmon. You could get a great sockeye salmon in a can for $3 or $4 with multiple servings in there. And so what I've got a great recipe. If anybody wants to reach out, I'll be happy to share. You can do a Google search. Sweet potato salmon patties. Oh my gosh. And so you can make up a huge batch of this, use a couple for that evening, throw them in the freezer, and it's a great defrost and throw it in the pan kind of meal. Cook it in coconut oil, throw it in the oven, however you want to do that. I mean, it's really good. That's how I get a lot of people to try some of these things. And, everybody I introduce this to, they get really excited about it.
Yeah. One thing that I was talking to somebody about this week too was the triglycerides being elevated. And, her comment was that it runs in her family. And I hear that all the time. And the problem is, eating carbs is going to raise your triglycerides as well as not getting enough omega-3s. So I think we've already spoken to both of those ideas. Is can you lower your carbs without it causing, a crisis? Can you lower your carbs without it feeling depressing? And I think some ways to do that are small steps, right? Like Mitch already mentioned, trying to take out the processed food, read labels if you're eating anything processed. My spouse brought home some gluten-free bread this morning, and I said, does this have corn syrup? And so we were reading the ingredients, and the kids were helping me because so often we're adding high fructose corn syrup to breads, and that's not good. So even a gluten-free bread is going to be unhealthy, obviously.
And cutting carbs doesn't have to be a ketogenic approach. I mean, like we said, getting the grains out, but I mean, think about all the carbs that you can still have: potatoes, beets, fruit, squash, pumpkin. I even like quinoa and wild rice, and even to take it a step further, you can soak them, and it's going to deactivate some of those anti-nutrients in there.
Yeah, I mean, we joke that the statistic right now is that of all the teenagers in the United States, the average teenager gets 40% of their vegetables from white potatoes, right? But that's French fries. And the reason that's bad is because you've taken the skin off, you've thrown it in canola oil. Like even those, mini white potatoes they're not unhealthy in any way. I mean, there's potassium in there. My kids love to eat the skin, right? If you're eating the skin, it's going to be much healthier.
Yeah, yeah. And even if you cook those potatoes and cool them down, now you've got resistant starch, and there's so many good things there. I want to back up. One thing that you said, and I like to really hit on this, especially when I'm talking with new clients, is this idea of it runs in the family. Well, what I think my message is, your DNA is not your destiny. We know that you're going to get your familiar, 30% of your DNA is your coming from your family or your overall well-being. The other 70% is environmental. It's the way that you live and move. And if you live the way that, if you say your grandmother got really sick from one of these lifestyle diseases, dementia, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and you're really afraid of that, well, if you live just like grandma did, and you eat the same things, same foods, and maybe you don't move your body, and then you're going to get the same issues. But we know that we can change our DNA in as little as 21 days, and we can turn off the bad stuff and turn on the good stuff. And that's just with food and lifestyle. I mean, how amazing is that?
Yeah, I mean, the statistics for Parkinson's disease it's about 10 to 15% genetic. And so what I mean by that is 85 to 90% of you getting Parkinson's has to do with things that you are in control of, right? Yeah. So most of it you can work on in terms of environmental exposures and food and stress and lifestyle. And I wanted to also mention that, you said the thing about selenium. People are also coming in taking things like iron and selenium when I see them. And the problem is we can overdose pretty easily on some of these micronutrients. And taking iron capsules actually kills the good gut bacteria. Yeah. And lots of women are given iron after they have babies. And sometimes the only thing we need to do is just do some gut healing for them to feel much better.
Oh, and luckily women get to bleed once a month, and they get to get rid of that iron. Us men, it accumulates and can cause all kinds of havoc. And all you need to do is go give blood every 2 or 3 months.
Yeah.
And maybe even avoiding some cast iron pans and things like that.
Yeah. And I mean, that's where women are not small men. And so, and that's Stacy Sims' kind of tagline. She's an exercise physiologist, PhD nutritionist who talks a lot about how to optimize nutrition for women. But she mentions, if women could intermittent fast 14 hours a day. So you eat for the 10-hour window and you fast for 14 hours, you would be able to detox a lot better, as opposed to eating for maybe 14 hours and only fasting for 10, right? That would make things more difficult.
And let's put that into perspective for people. We're talking about you stop eating at 7 p.m. and you're going till 9 a.m. Now, you could do some easy ways to ease into this. This goes back to talking about getting your carbs down. Ease into your day with fat and protein, right? Like, I think what got me into all of this stuff was Bulletproof coffee. So if you can wake up and you're starving at 7 a.m. and you need something, just have some fat. It's almost considered fat fasting because it's not going to raise insulin like protein and carbohydrates are going to do. So starting your day, Bulletproof coffee, it's really easy. 1 tablespoon of grass-fed butter. I like Kerrygold. 1 tablespoon of MCT oil. But if you don't have that, go with coconut oil. You definitely want to blend it. It's going to taste better. And then your brain is getting these amazing fats that, I mean, for me, when I first had Bulletproof coffee, my brain turned on and I felt amazing for the first time in forever. And that was kind of my gateway drug into all this craziness that I'm into now.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then one of the things I like to do in the morning is if I'm eating breakfast, which I make sure from ovulation to my period that I am actually eating in the morning, just because I need more carbs, and all women need more carbs from ovulation to their period. I have some wild blueberries because they are lower in fructose and higher in antioxidants than something like banana or mango would be. Those equatorian fruits are usually higher in sugar, and those are the ones that we want to avoid having too much of. So
Yeah,
The
we've gotten
recommendation is
to
basically 2 servings a day of fruit. And would you say that would be a good recommendation, Mitch?
I go back and forth on that. I mean, I think we bastardized fruit. I think that we've genetically modified it and grown it in a way that increases. I mean, I saw these blueberries yesterday that were damn this big. Okay, now that's very different than having some that are picked, that are local, that are wild, and they're smaller, they're more tart. I think that's what berries are supposed to be. So if we're talking about blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, even some strawberries, yeah, I think it's great. But going after these large sprayed, going back to the glyphosate issue, you want organic when you're looking at those berries because of their thin skin. But I think berries are great. Polyphenols, antioxidants. Again, talking about the reactive oxygen species, that's going to combat that. I think fruit definitely has a place, and I like to even combine it with a little bit of fat. I mean, making if you can tolerate milk, taking some heavy cream and whipping that up, or if you can't, what I like to do is I do some full fat coconut milk from a can. I put a little bit of cinnamon in there, a little bit of stevia. It whips up. You can even chill the bowl before you whip it, and then put it in the freezer, and it stands up really nice too. So I think that's a fantastic treat at nighttime, especially having your having that heavy cream, whipped cream kind of source with the berries on top. Yeah, I love it.
That seems like it would be great for my people that have candida, and I'm trying to get them off of a lot of the sugary treats, but really mentally they need like that one thing every day to look forward to.
Yeah.
So that would be a good treat to make.
Yeah, and right now, we're dealing with this virus, and I think one of the most important things for people to hear is having getting what am I trying to say? Your blood sugar variability. You want to control that. So these lower glycemic berries, and avoiding the some of the bananas, or even if you're going to have a banana, maybe cut it in half.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that can be a lot of help and right now and boost your immune system.
I think apples are great. They say that the antioxidant capacity of an apple, only 10% of that comes from the vitamin C. 90% of the healing properties of the apple come from all of the other polyphenols and antioxidants that are in the apple.
Yeah.
And that old adage about an apple a day, I mean, the pectin in that apple is keeping you pooping. And all the things that we talked about in terms of things that would make neurodegeneration worse, they're all going to be even worse if you're constipated, right? But unfortunately, the average American is not fasting for 12 hours at night, and they are constipated. So
Yeah. Yeah, and go out of your way to go to the farmers markets, to go to, maybe if you've got somebody that lives out in the country or has an apple orchard, go and get those apples, because that's how nature intended them. They're not these. An apple is not. If you ever go in nature, it's not this waxy, bright red finished product that you see in the grocery store. They're tart. If you ever, especially if you get a little bit early, you bite into that thing and it's so sour and your mouth puckers up. I think that's a big, and even don't even get me started on juice. Everybody thinks that juice is so good, and we've removed the fiber and that's going to actually slow down that blood sugar spike. I mean, it's no difference than drinking Coca-Cola. I mean, I think we can all agree that Coca-Cola isn't the most healthy thing, but it's the exact same thing when you're juicing that fruit. It's just a sugar bomb.
yeah, I think the exception would be when the juice looks green,
Bingo.
like
Yeah.
celery juice.
What's the famous guy that he says, if it tastes good, spit it out? I can't remember what it was.
Well, and this comes, I think maybe we'll talk about autophagy at the end, but I also wanted to mention 2 things here. Yoga is going to help. Now, you've heard this a million times, and it's probably getting tiring of hearing yoga is good for you, but the reason why yoga helps with neurodegeneration and mitochondrial healing and detox is because, number one, you're pausing long enough to take a deep breath. It turns out that the deep breath detoxes the lungs, and this helps the liver detox, because the lungs and the liver are essentially right next to each other in terms of doing all the hard work of getting the toxins out of the body. So if you can detox the lungs, you're going to help detox the liver. And when you do a yoga class, even a very gentle yoga class, if there's twisting involved, this actually detoxes the organs.
Wow. Yeah.
And then one other thing to mention but yoga doesn't have to be some crazy power yoga class. I think everybody could start with just 10 minutes of sitting and maybe even 5 minutes of just sitting and taking a couple deep breaths. If the average American takes 0 deep breaths a day and you take even 1, then you beat the average, right? And then
Can't plug Kate Godley's class enough. I mean, Kate has a fantastic yoga. It is restorative yoga. It's easy. Anybody can do it. I love using it as stress management, as a recovery tool. You know, if I've worked out really hard, I'm kind of sore, I'm going to get in there, move some of those adhesions, muscle adhesions in my body, so my back won't hurt as much. I always leave feeling better than I walked in. And I think, you know, on top of the deep breathing and the twisting and the moving, it's a great way to lower stress and cortisol.
Yeah, and I'm never trying to make money off of yoga. It's always offered as what you can afford. So we're doing Zoom classes Thursday nights and Sunday mornings. So I'll post that link too right now. And Tatiana, who's in my building, is also offering Zoom yoga, and so is Carla. So we're all at the Whole Health Collective offering free yoga right now. But thanks, Mitch.
Thank you so much.
I wish I had a video of my first yoga class after having my son 9 years ago, because I wasn't really sure that I was going to survive. But I knew when I left, at least I took 1 deep breath. And so I kept going back. And I know it sounds cliche, but it really did save my life at a time when, you know, competitiveness and anxiety and a lot of health conditions that ran in my family were catching up with me at a very young age because of adrenal dysfunction and because of having a son that was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes and not sleeping well. So
Yeah.
yoga literally, I mean, it took me from sort of a ball of nerves to a human again.
Yeah, really. The first time I did a yoga class with you, I remember I had so much arthritis that even in these like easy poses, I could barely move. But now that I've fixed a lot of that, I really don't have arthritis anymore. I'm playing golf again for the first time in 5 years. I do yoga several times a day. I got all kinds of exercise equipment over here. You know, so no matter where you're at, you can get your life back. And I think movement and food, all these things are huge. Absolutely.
Yeah.
My favorite part's the shavasana at the end. So you just kind of lay there and get you a little nap or get into a meditative state. I think, you know, we can get down a rabbit hole with meditation too. I mean, that's both of those tools, especially combined, have transformed my health.
Yeah, and I've met people that were able to actually visualize, kind of like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. They were able to visualize during meditation their body healing, and it sped up the healing process. And so I think that's the hope that I want people to get out of this video is not only can we reverse aging and heal the brain, we can heal parts of the body. We can do that not just with food, but also with the power of our thoughts too.
Oh gosh, that preach. Amen. I mean, what Dr. Joe says, this changed my life this past year is, you know, thoughts that fire together, wire together. And so you get what you focus on. It's a law of attraction. So if I wake up every day and I go, where's my pain? Where's my pain? I don't know who I am right now. Oh, there it is. Thank God. I didn't have my pain there for a while. I didn't know who I was. So if that's what you're focusing on and looking for all day long, that's what you're going to get. But if you can wake up and set an intention and look at the future, what you do want, you know, quantum physics tells us that we can draw that event to us in real time. We don't have to go find it. It finds us.
Yep. So was there anything, I think we have to wrap up. Is there anything you wanted to mention about autophagy before we wrap up?
I think, well, you tell me how long we've got. I mean, I think fasting is I think you can get autophagy through fasting, by even drinking wine can even stimulate autophagy, actually. Exercise, fasting, movement, all these different things. I mean, and fasting doesn't have to be this water only kind of deal. I mean, one of my favorite new methods of fasting is the fasting mimicking diet. Some people, especially that are you know, sicker than others, their body can't support releasing all of those toxins during the fast, and that can really, it can hurt them more than help them. So supporting yourself with a small meal that supplies antioxidants can help support those detox pathways and get that out better. I use all different kinds of strategies. If you ask me what's one thing that I did that got my life back from Lyme and mold and heavy metals, it's fasting. And you know, so you guys can, I always say start with 12 hours, like Kate's saying, work your way up, maybe increase an hour every week or something like that. Men can go up to 16, 18 hours. I like to see my ladies at 12 to 14. That doesn't mean that women can't go longer. I have women that do, but you want to make sure you really read your body, and especially looking at your cycle and what time of month that is. But here's a really quick one that you guys can try on. It's the fasting mimicking diet. Okay, it's 1,000 calories day one, and then you go 3 to 4 more days of 800 calories. Now, you want to have mostly fats. You want to have all your sources, all your food is coming from plant sources, so no animal meat. Animal meat's going to kick you out of that detox, that AMP-K pathway. And then this is a little bit counterintuitive, but actually having a little bit more protein. I really like, but you also want proteins that's not going to stimulate mTOR. So that would be things like essential amino acids, collagen, some of these plant proteins. I think all of those are great strategies. I mean, if you look at it, you can do it really simple. It could be as simple as, I'm going to eat avocados and macadamia nuts, and that's going to be my meal 2, maybe 3 times a day for the next 4 to 5 days. There is no better feeling for me personally than completing a fast and the way that my body feels for weeks after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's actually an awesome place to end. And we should do another talk on digestion of proteins and fats, how different things affect that and what you can do to fix it. We should do another talk on the vagus nerve. What else did we bring up?
Totally. Gosh, I got all kinds of TBI. We can go deeper into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would also like to do a talk on the Nutri-Eval where we could even go through your old Nutri-Eval, and I could explain to people why you can eat foods that you aren't necessarily digesting, and therefore that's when you need to do IV or use supplements. So.
Oh yeah, I mean, you just putting me on glycine. I can't remember the other one. I think it's the same one that you're.
Isoleucine and glycine.
Yeah, putting me on those 2 things, like cranking up my omega-3s, my gut function I wasn't digesting anything. The only thing that I could eat was meat. I couldn't have any vegetables. Not that I didn't want to eat vegetables. I missed them like crazy. And just doing a little bit of work with Kate over this past year has really improved that. I would love to see another Nutri-Val here the next couple of months too.
Let's do it. Yeah,
man.
Awesome. All right. Thanks so much for your time today, Mitch. And I'm going to post this on my YouTube and I'll send you the link. So
awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Kate. I appreciate it. The opportunity.
Thanks. Have a good day.